Sharon sat at her kitchen window, looking outside nervously. It was already dark outside, even though it was only dinner time, but winter always brought an end to the daylight hours fairly early. After watching the streets for a few more seconds, she could not wait anymore. She was worried. So, she picked up her phone and dialed the number. It started ringing. Sharon waited, praying deep down inside that they would pick up the phone. She sat listening intently until her high hopes dissolved into the sound of the voicemail. Sharon hung up without leaving a message. She glanced outside again, and when she seen that the streets were still empty, she tried again. She dialed the number, and the ringing started. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. Her body was screaming for her daughter to pick up the phone and let her know that she was okay. And then, silence. No more rings, no voicemail. Someone had turned off the phone. "16-year-old Leanne Tiernan and her best friend, 15-year-old Sarah Whitehouse, had spent a fantastic day together, laughing and giggling as they went from shop to shop, buying Christmas presents for their friends and family on November 25th of 2000. The sun set early in England during the winter months, and on that day, the sun had long since disappeared over the horizon by the time the two girls finally decided that it was time for them to board the public transit bus and begin their short journey home. It did not take long for the bus to reach their bus stop located at Houghley Lane, and at 4:50 p.m. together they got off the bus. Standing there on the sidewalk, they had a quick little chit-chat before they parted ways. They said their goodbyes with the intention of seeing each other soon, and then they both turned away from one another and began to walk in opposite directions to their home. Sarah glanced over her shoulder back at Leanne and watched as Leanne walked towards a shortcut known as Houghley Gill. This shortcut would allow Leanne to make it home sooner than if she had taken the main roads back to her house. But this shortcut, even though she would be home sooner, had its downsides. The shortcut through Houghley Gill was a dark path that did not have any lights, and it ran through a secluded wooded area. Sarah didn't really think too much about Leanne walking home this way, though, because it was a path that they used regularly. And that day did not strike Sarah as being any different from any other day. And so she turned her head back to the direction of her own home and just carried on walking. When Sarah got home, she opened the front door, walked in the house, and headed straight for the phone, and then she proceeded to call Leanne. They both lived about the same distance from the bus stop, even with the shortcut, so Leanne should have arrived home about the same time that Sarah got home. But, to Sarah's surprise, when Sarah called Leanne's house, she learned that Leanne had not arrived home yet. So now that Sarah had called looking for Leanne and Leanne's mom now knew she should be home any minute, Leanne's mom began to keep a lookout for her daughter, glancing out the window every few minutes to see if she could be seen walking down the street towards the house. And after giving Leanne a few more minutes to get home, and there was still no sign of her, her mother Sharon picked up the phone and called Leanne on her cell phone to find out what was taking her so long. But Leanne did not answer. And then when Sharon tried to call Leanne again, the phone only rang 3 or 4 times before it completely cut off. And Sharon was no longer able to be in contact with her daughter. This sent Sharon into a complete panic. Her daughter was not home yet when she should be. Her cell phone had gone completely dead. Sharon was not waiting around any longer, and she immediately called the police to report her daughter missing. After speaking with Sharon, the police did not waste any time, and a search for Leanne was started immediately with massive help from the community. Friends, family, volunteers, and police were very quickly swarming the area where Leanne was last seen by her friend Sarah.
As soon as Leanne was reported missing, Houghley Gill became a focal point for us. This to us was potentially the scene. We had to look at it that way. This was the place that she'd been last seen. This was our starting point.
This search continued for weeks, covering thousands of houses in their respective buildings. Businesses, bodies of water were drained, and hundreds of suspects were questioned, along with 12 search warrants being issued. Even the garbage collection was stopped in order for the police to search the trash before it was even taken to the dump. But sadly, there was not a single sign of Leanne. 8 days later, after Leanne went missing, a reenactment of the day Leanne had disappeared was filmed by a TV news crew, with Leanne's sister Michelle playing the part of Leanne and Sarah playing the part of herself, in an effort to draw as much attention to the case as possible. Leanne's picture was also printed on the side of milk cartons, and there was a local business that had actually put up £10,000 reward for Leanne's safe return. The police desperately needed tips to start coming in, and they needed them now, or else this case was going to go cold. With every passing minute, the likelihood of finding Leanne alive got slimmer and slimmer. And after airing the reenactment on TV, there were many calls that came into the police where different people thought that they had a tip that could potentially help find Leanne. And out of the hundreds of leads generated, only one lead ended up being of any use. After seeing the reenactment on TV, a lady came forward to say that she had seen a man who was walking a black and tan dog through Houghley Gill, Leanne's shortcut, around the same time Leanne had gone missing. The lady went on to tell the police that the man was about 5 foot 8 inches tall, he was stocky, he was round, and he had a face that might have had scars on it, but she was not 100% sure on that detail. She also mentioned that he was wearing a long, waterproof jacket, but even though the jacket was long, she could see his jeans, and she could see his jeans were very dirty. She also mentioned that he was wearing a black stocking cap, which is also known as a beanie or a toque in different parts of the world. With this new information, the police tracked down and brought in 70 different men who frequently used Houghley Gill to walk their dog. And they presented each of these men to this lady who had called in the tip. But unfortunately, not a single one of them matched her description, and every single one of them were eliminated as suspects, which was great for them, but definitely not good for the case. And at this point, the police were out of leads and suspects. And so in a final effort, they released a composite sketch of the man they suspected as having something to do with the disappearance of Leanne. But after that, there was nothing more to go on, and 10 months passed by without a hint of Leanne or the man walking the dog through Houghley Gill. On August 20th, 2001, a man by the name of Mark Beeson was walking his 2 dogs through Linley Wood, an area of deep forest in North Yorkshire, when he came across an object lying in the woods. He kind of peeked around it, noting that it appeared to be some sort of package that had been bound in twine. So he got a bit closer to try to get a better look, and when he did, he noticed something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand straight up. Near the package, he could see a sock lying on the ground, and everything inside him told him that this was not a simple package. He knew without a doubt that there was a body wrapped inside all of that twine and fabric, and without any hesitation, he called the police immediately. The victim's body was wrapped in a floral print duvet cover, and it was held together with black twine. And underneath that floral print duvet cover, it was also wrapped in 9 large green garbage bags with a single black garbage bag over its head, and a dog collar, cable ties, and a dark-colored scarf had been used around the victim's neck, holding the black garbage bag in place. When they removed the body from all of the items wrapping it up, there was absolutely no doubt that they had found Leanne Tiernan. She had died from strangulation. Her arms were bound behind her back with 3 plastic cable ties, 1 around each wrist and a third securing the other 2 together. And she was still wearing the clothes she had disappeared in, except her coat and her boots were now missing. While the investigators were looking at Leanne's body, they noted to themselves that after 10 months, it was odd that her body was in such good condition, to the point that she could be identified so easily. There was very little decomposition, and even though they were positive it was her, they confirmed her identity using her fingerprints, and after analyzing her body tissue, forensic investigators determined that she had been frozen for quite some time. It was clear that Leanne's body had not been lying in the spot where she had been found for very long. Someone had most likely stored her body in a freezer somewhere for the past several months, and then eventually, very recently, hauled her out to the location where she was found and left her there.
Everything points to the fact that she was frozen in a domestic freezer for that 9 months period.
Forensic investigators found hair and pieces of burnt wood on her clothing, as well as pollen from a plum tree and a poplar tree, and a privet bush. They were able to determine that the cable ties used to bind her wrists were very specific, having been manufactured exclusively for the UK Postal Service, and the green plastic garbage bags were somewhat unique as well because they were only sold by a single grocery store that only had 2 locations in the area. And carpet fibers, as well as animal hair that matched the description of the black and tan dog, were also found. But one of the most crucial pieces of evidence, which was also one of the strangest pieces of evidence, was the dog collar. The dog collar had been used to cinch up the plastic bag around Leanne's neck. And when investigators spoke with a pet supply company regarding who had purchased this particular dog collar, they were told that they only had 3 customers in that area of Leeds, and one of those customers lived within a half-mile of Leanne Tiernan. His name was John Taylor, and John Taylor actually purchased 6 of these dog collars. Immediately after announcing the discovery of Leanne's body, police asked the public for help. And when a lady by the name of Deborah Benjamin heard that the police were looking for anyone that frequented the Linley Woods area to get in touch with them, she knew she had to call. Deborah Benjamin told police that she often placed ads in the personal section of the local newspaper called The Lonely Hearts. She did this because, well, she was lonely, and it was a way to meet men. And so one day, a man by the name of John Taylor responded to her ad. She told police that John loved to hunt and did so in Linley Woods, and she knew this because she had actually gone with him there many times. She told detectives that she had eventually ended their relationship because he was obsessed with violent bondage. He liked tying up her hands behind her back with plastic cable ties, 1 on each wrist and then a 3rd to connect them together, exactly the same way Leanne Tiernan's hands had been bound when she was found. John Taylor was a divorced father of 2 grown children, and he lived alone, not far from Houghley Gill. On October 16, 2001, only 2 months after discovering Leanne's body, police detained and questioned John Taylor, and they discovered that John Taylor worked for Parcel Force, which undeniably gave him free access to the same cable ties that were used to bind Leanne. After this discovery, the police searched his home, garage, and backyard for 10 days. And during those 10 days, they found twine similar to that used to secure the duvet. In his yard were the plum and poplar trees as well as the privet bush that had left pollen on Leanne. They found the same type of cable ties, identical dog collars, and they also found 3 very large freezers. And the first thing they noticed as they walked through the door of John's house was the fact that his floor was completely bare. He had clearly ripped up the carpet from inside, and he had done so fairly recently. And then he took that carpet outside and burnt it in a fire in his backyard. But in spite of John's efforts, this did not prevent the investigators from finding what they were looking for, because the nails that had secured his floorboards underneath the carpet had snagged the carpet fibers, and the investigators found those fibers. And those carpet fibers matched the fibers found on Leanne's body. But most importantly, and most damning of all, were the hairs found on Leanne's body, because those hairs matched John Taylor's hairs. When the police confronted John Taylor with this massive amount of evidence against him, John Taylor simply confessed to kidnapping Leanne, and then he went on to explain that on November 25th, 2000, he was walking his dog through Houghley Gill when he saw Leanne Tiernan walking home. And as they passed by each other walking in opposite directions, without any hesitation, no thought at all, he quickly turned around and grabbed her from behind, throwing his coat over her head so she couldn't see anything. He then tied her hands behind her back with his dog leash, and after that, he took her home, where he then assaulted her. He explained that on that day, when Leanne's mother was calling Leanne's cell phone to find out where she was, at that very moment, John Taylor had Leanne, and John Taylor was the person who turned off Leanne's cell phone, cutting her mother off from her daughter forever. Leanne had tried as hard as she could to escape, but Taylor explained that during the struggle, she fell off the bed, hitting her head as she fell. And he told police that her hitting her head is what ultimately killed her. The only thing left that needed to be explained was why Leanne had been found with cable ties, a scarf, and a dog collar around her neck if she had died from hitting her head, as Taylor had stated. And Taylor simply said that these items were there so that he could move her body more efficiently. Basically, he said he used them as a handle. Taylor maintained that Leanne's death was an accident all the way up until his first day of his trial in 2002, when he finally relented and admitted that he had murdered her, pleading guilty but never explaining exactly what happened in his house on that day. After that, John Taylor was sentenced to 2 life sentences. As time went on after John's sentencing, the police tested his DNA against the evidence found in 2 older assault cases that took place in and around the same area of Houghley Gill in the 1980s, as well as 2 other cases that had taken place in the 1970s. And as a result, Taylor eventually confessed to those crimes as well, and he was sentenced to a whole life tariff order, guaranteeing that he will never leave prison. Detectives have no doubt that John Taylor is responsible for additional murders, believing that he is actually a serial killer. These murder cases are still being worked on in an effort to bring justice to the victims and their families. So that's going to wrap it up for this video. Thank you for watching, and if you got something out of today's story and would like to help support this channel, the very best way to do that is to simply click that like and subscribe button and toss me a comment. It's a win-win, because you get to enjoy more videos like this one, and I get to continue making them for you. And I will see you again later.